Surviving the Survivor, we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor. It is the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. It is not a tagline. It is our reality. We do it day in, day out, thanks to a very strong team behind the scenes, including the COE, Steve Cohen, who books all of our guests. You got Space Coast on the West Coast, and, of course, the mods and others who are helping out behind the scenes, making this show possible. Before I even get going, I'm a proud dad today. My oldest got into her first choice middle school. It's like applying to a graduate program at MIT. The crap that they put these kids through, it should be criminal. But whatever. She dealt with it. She's in. And because of that, my wife is ecstatic, as she should be. Ironically, my daughter has a basketball game at that very school right now. And so the COE has been a little delinquent in getting the graphics, but we were able to scramble and put that together. So congrats to my daughter. I can give her a big hug and kiss when I see her. So this today, of course, is all about the Alexander brothers story that continues to escalate. We've got two reporters I'm going to introduce you to in a moment from a publication called The Real Deal, which is the real deal when it comes to discussing real estate and all the news and happenings in real estate. And they are the ones who really broke this story after a single civil lawsuit was filed over the summer. And then it went to 4 civil lawsuits and then suddenly 40 women. And the count now is at 60 accusers. And that is why the thumbnail says 60 accusers and climbing, because very likely it is going to climb. That number sadly will climb, I'm sure. The brothers are accused of conspiring to both drug and essay, we don't use the full word on the YouTube, dozens of women over nearly 2 decades. And despite the mounting allegations, they have pleaded not guilty. They are aggressively fighting back, and they've got some money to do it. So the question is here, is justice closing in, or is power and privilege going to prevail, which I hope not. By the way, breaking news that I'm not going to get into other than to tell you that Kanye's wife, I don't even know her name, is said to be divorcing Ye. So we got some news in the Kanye world. A marriage that lasted 2 years. She's apparently had enough of him. Moving on to our best guests here. We got Sheridan Wall, as I said, an investigative reporter with The Real Deal, covering the Alexander brothers and coming to us from their second home, New York City. And then you've got Katherine, I should have asked you this off air, Kallergis?
Kallergis, yeah.
Kallergis, there you go. Katherine Kallergis, an investigative reporter as well with The Real Deal, covering the Miami scene. And I don't know what's crazier real estate-wise. I'll ask them in a minute. Miami, just overall, Miami or New York, because they're two crazy real estate cities. And then, of course, friend of the show, Darby Fox, a family therapist, and she has dealt with victims of sexual predators and has a thing or two to say about that. So starting off, these are 2 of the 3 brothers right here, and they're looking a little beat up, and these are older photos. Now, since they've gone into federal detention, and they're in the same place as P. Diddy, as Luigi Mangione, Sheridan, let's start with you. We haven't seen new federal photos, correct?
No, we haven't. And for the most part, federal hearings and proceedings they're not private. Anybody who's here can go, but they don't usually allow cameras or any kind of technology in the courtroom.
Look at this. Early on, I had to bring this up. Thank you so much. Carmen and I did a podcast last night about the book. It was probably I felt bad for the guy. He was a younger guy. The podcast is called Not in a Huff, because his name is Jackson Huff. Not in a Huff podcast. I'll put it out when it's out, but I felt bad for Jackson when Carmen and I were finished, but he seemed to take it well. So you just heard Sheridan say, in the federal system, you you get sketches. You've seen those of Diddy. We're probably not going to get photos for a while, but I'm told they're looking a little rough. And for those who follow the show, you know what Donna Adelson looks like. She's another South Florida person who is she's accused of murder in a murder for hire plot, and we see her in jail, and it's not a federal detention. It's not nearly as bad as MDC Brooklyn, and she is looking worse for the wear. Shout out to Annalee Finch. And thank you very much. It means a lot. I appreciate it. So I am hearing from a source, a few sources, that Oren's house is now quietly on sale here in the Miami Beach area. And we got some photos here. So I'm going to try to bring these up. So, Katherine, since you kind of handle Miami, is this something that you're aware of? Do you know about this?
Yeah, I'm looking into it. I didn't realize it was it was going to be on this podcast. But it is something that I've heard. I haven't confirmed that it's true, but it's a pretty new house that he had built on the water in Miami Beach. So that's what we're hearing.
Yeah, and it's being sold off market, so people wouldn't necessarily know about it.
Yeah, it wouldn't be publicly listed, I don't think.
Yeah, but I believe they're asking, and I was looking at some of the records, and I have it here. It's a 5-bedroom, 4-bath, sits on a half-acre lot, again, in Miami Beach. It was built in 2000. It was last sold for $10 million, but from what I understand, Oren is asking upwards of $50 million. So, I mean, Katherine, back to you. Is that a realistic price? I personally don't know that it is. And is it a sort of a desperation move here to put together some financial assets to pay for legal bills?
Well, I will say, by the way, the specs that you listed off, those are the previous house. So he bought the land and had the house torn down. And so there's a new modern, these are renderings, it looks like, but there's a new modern mansion that's been built on it. So we had done a report about their assets, the family's assets. And I think that this house, just from speaking to sources and looking at comparable sales, would probably sell for, north of $40 million. It depends on, whether they have a sense of urgency. Like if they need to sell it faster, it may not sell for that much. But that was what we had gathered in our reporting.
Yeah, so that would be, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, about 4 times or 5 times what they paid for it, right? I mean,
not including the cost to develop, but obviously, yeah.
So Sheridan, that's kind of an interesting point in the story that they're now trying to offload some real estate, because again, they're going to have some really hefty real estate bills. But what does it say about the situation, specifically, I guess, with Oren and his wife? He's selling the house. Do we know what she's up to?
I'm not totally sure what she's up to. She was at there was a hearing last week, and she was there. She attended, and they've now been moved to New York, so they're here too. Other than that, I'm not sure. They just had their first child, I believe in December, so just about a month ago.
Darby, to you, and Darby is again a licensed therapist. These two and their brother and the fourth guy, who happens to be my mom's neighbor in Miami Beach, Ohad Fisherman, they all have young kids, if not infant children. And now you're hearing Oren is selling this house, at least trying to sell it quietly, on the market. What is going on emotionally, do you think, with these wives? And then I'll tell you kind of what I'm hearing from about one of them.
Well, I mean, I don't think they might not all fit into the exact same category, but I would imagine there is a great deal of distrust, and they're questioning their husbands and how could this have happened. And then I would imagine there's a little bit, I don't know about each one of them, but you would typically see one or two of them saying, like, I can't be married to you. Like, this, absolutely, you're disgusting. And they would want out. And there would probably be a couple that say, I believe whatever you tell me, and this couldn't be you. And they're kind of caught up in that same magical thinking that the women who they abused would have been caught up in. They're handsome, they're wealthy, they're fun, charismatic. So there's a little bit of a sort of twisted charm in that.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what.
All going to fall in the same one, but those are probably the two categories.
Yeah, and you're looking, thanks to Space Ghost doing this last minute, putting up some more photos here, and you heard these they do look like renderings, probably not the actual house, but it gives you an idea at the very least. I'm also hearing that Oren's wife, and I'm hearing this from a lot of people, and I don't know if you guys have, Katherine or Sheridan, that she is basically in denial, telling friends, like she was out to dinner the other night, telling friends, oh, it's not a big deal. He's going to be home soon. Katherine, you're here in Miami. Are you hearing similar things, at least with his wife?
Not exactly. I haven't heard too much about his wife. I know that after after the lawsuits were first reported, they were really kind of operating like business as usual, like socially. But no, I haven't really heard that.
Yeah. Katherine, what are you hearing about? I mean, I'm sorry, Sheridan, what are you hearing in regards to, family, whether it be the parents and or spouses, in terms of how they're handling what's happening to either their children or their husbands?
Well, Tall's wife, Ariel Alexander, she has already filed for divorce. She lives up here in New York. The two of them were, last I know, were living at an apartment in 432 Park Avenue, which is kind of a billionaire's row, a condo building. And I think we reported, I don't remember exactly when, but a few weeks ago, that she had filed. They also just recently had a child, the first. And so that's the most I've heard in terms of, what their wives are saying. Their parents have been up in New York since they were transferred here. I've seen both their parents at the federal hearings, so they're definitely here. I think their uncle has been in and out of New York as well, and so I know that the parents were very. They've offered in the pretrial hearings about their bail. The parents have offered basically all of their assets to secure their release, which has been rejected. They're still in jail, but they're obviously
where does I mean, sorry, where's the bond hearing? Because I know they're still trying to get out. They've been denied multiple times, and also as a collective group. But at one point, I was hearing a figure of $1 billion. I don't know that the dad has close to that, but he's got probably a couple $100 million, between them all. And then I heard that they were offering at least $100 million per brother. So I've heard all these like crazy figures. Have you, narrowed it down to, you basically said they were willing to give up all their assets at this point. Is that true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what they said. The actual documents that list their assets that they would have had to show a judge, we don't have access to. But they have suggested that their assets, their real estate combined with, what they have in the bank and all of that would total around $1 billion. I'm not totally sure, exactly if that's the case or not. But on top of that, they've also offered to have like corporate bonds, which is a different process. But so then there would be, an additional amount of money that would be offered. So it's quite a lot. Their defense attorneys in one of the pretrial hearings were, basically like pointing to them sitting in the courtroom and saying like they're willing to give up everything to, that's how sure they are that their sons are going to show up for trial and for the other court dates. So they're pretty, they've offered everything they've got.
Yeah. And Sheridan, one more quick question. People always ask me, is Tal like a full-fledged brother? Because everyone feels like he looks so different from the other brothers. But as far as we know, he is a biological son of Oren and Alon's parents as well, correct?
Yes, as far as I know.
Okay. And I saw that question in the chat, so I just wanted to, kind of make sure of that. To you, Darby, you just heard them say that the family, the parents here, are literally willing to give up everything to get their kids home. You see Judge Caproni here, federal judge who's presiding over this. In a hearing held back in January, Judge Caproni denied the brothers' request for bail, indicating that they pose a serious flight risk, and evidence is strong that they pose a danger to unsuspecting women. So even if they have the money, Darby, I mean, even if they have this money to free themselves, what's your take as a therapist here? I mean, it seems like they are extremely dangerous predators, and I personally, I don't think they're getting out. But what would you say if you were consulting this judge?
Well, I think the judge is spot on. I do think if they aren't going to head out of the country, they are a serious risk for other women, because again, they've been able to do this to women at all levels, right? From the time they were in high school up into this part of their lives. And, I don't know that they're doing it while they're married, but most likely while they had serious significant others. So that is their MO, is to prey on the women, and they don't really care about the women. And they're handsome, they're wealthy. There are a lot of people that they could damage, just as they have.
Yeah. So Katherine Sheridan, you're lucky because you're not old like me, and I don't recall like a real estate story quite like this one. In the time that you guys have been at The Real Deal or working as journalists, like where do you put this in terms of a, eye-grabbing, headline-grabbing, sort of sensationalistic story? It has all these elements: good-looking twins, the houses in Miami, the $1 million apartments in New York, the Hamptons, all this. Is this something that people are, kind of glued to The Real Deal about these days, in terms of, the attractiveness, if you will, of the story? Sheridan, I guess you could take that one.
Actually, Katherine is probably better. She's been at The Real Deal for a really long time, so she
Katherine,
she can speak to more of the history of the real estate industry.
Katherine, stories. Jump in there.
I mean, I think it's definitely like it's one of the biggest stories, if not the biggest story, that we have worked on. And I've been with The Real Deal for 10 years. It's something that touches like the ultra luxury and the luxury market in New York and Miami, which are, I mean, obviously, they're one of they're two of the top markets. And there's so many alleged victims who have come forward, that it's just a much bigger story than, one or two alleged instances of this kind of behavior. So it's been, there's a lot of big stories that we cover. Like we covered the Surfside collapse site, the tragedy, and then what happened after with the property and the litigation. Like there are a lot of big stories, but I think in terms of like our core readership, which, a lot of residential real estate brokers, a lot of people who follow the top, 1% of what's going on. Like this has been the biggest story. There's, I mean, and you South Florida, that the news market here is unlike any other. But I think that the fact that it's been covered by the mainstream media so much also shows that.
Yeah, and I did work as a reporter here, not once but twice. They asked me to come back when the Surfside buildings collapsed. They said, I need you for 2 or 3 days. And a year and a half later, I was still there. But that was a super tragic story, and I drive by that all the time. It's just basically a gaping hole in the ground now. But people also talking about, this just sort of highlights. And Darby, I'll come to you. That it sort of highlights the excess here in Miami, the materialistic nature. You have it everywhere. You have it in New York City. I guess from a psychological perspective, there's a lot of people in chat saying they couldn't afford. I saw someone saying they couldn't afford like a sofa in the house, let alone the house. What is it about? I mean, you have all this money. It's interesting because a guy like Elon Musk, who's the richest man in the world, basically doesn't even live in a home. Like he's always posting photos that he's like crashing in someone's house. I saw a picture inside one of his bedroom the other day, and it looked like a dorm room. He had like, all these Diet Coke cans. So a guy like Elon Musk that could buy a gazillion of these, not into it. Warren Buffett lives in the same house. Then you got Jeff Bezos, who bought like 4 homes or 3 homes on Indian Creek, which is billionaire's bunker. What is the psychology, I guess, behind this, where people with this money, if you got it, I guess you can spend it. But is it like, look at me, I am super successful, and I'm going to dabble in excess in front of your face?
Yeah, I think that's the psychology for the people that are really over the top with it, as the Alexander brothers have been, right? And I think that goes also towards a sense of entitlement. Like, look at me, look at how much wealth I have. Typically, especially in our country, wealth gives you whether or not it's earned, a power. And I think that people who prey on others that are that narcissistic as the Alexander brothers really do think that makes them look better and distinguish them from other people.
By the way, I see a comment from Lindsay. I won $1 billion. I take that too, actually. I wouldn't necessarily buy 30 Ferraris, but I'd buy one for Phil Waters, who's on tomorrow. By the way, tomorrow we're discussing possible serial killer in New Orleans. You guys may have heard about a reporter who was drugged and then died covering the Super Bowl, 27 years old. And turns out that the woman they have in custody, they think could be a serial killer just out in plain sight for many years. So Phil and Scott's debating whether he's in Philadelphia, if he's going to go to the Eagles Super Bowl parade or if he's going to come on STS. We will see where his loyalties lie tomorrow. Lindsay, I did not forget about you. Make sure we catch up after the show because I want to hear about that. But it's been a crazy sordid day. And look at Black Widow from the Republic of Ireland weighing in. Loads of rich people looking people are mortgaged to hell. Here, if there's any place where that is true, it is in Miami. You'll see two-toned Rolls Royce pulling into like a Section 8 housing, but they've got the Rolls Royce going there. So, Sheridan, to you, I mean, how often are you working on this story? Like, I mean, are you on the phone making calls about this all day? Are you able to cover other stories? Because this seems like there's so many moving parts.
I mean, we cover this fairly often, I would say, but it kind of depends on what's going on at the moment. We have had periods since this story broke where we were on the phone all day, calling and publishing, every day or every other day. As the charges have come, and we've been covering the hearings, it kind of depends on their court schedule. Of course, we are still checking in with all the people that we've been speaking to since the beginning, which happens probably more regularly than just our coverage. The Real Deal it's a great publication, but we're not a particularly huge one. So Katherine and I have both been, covering our normal kind of like daily flow of stories as well.
That's good to know. They always keep you busy when you're a journalist. They will find something for you to do. But there's also a little more news that's coming out that I just happened to catch before coming on. And I think this may be your guys' competitors, although I'm not 100% sure. And to be honest, I have misplaced the publication name. But whoever this publication is, I will credit them after the show. They're saying now that in this deal with Official, which is the name of these of Tal and Oren's company, that they were not paying their attorneys in some litigation related to some commercial real estate lawsuits relating to the business side of things. You're shaking your head yes there, Katherine. So is this true? Are they already at the point where they're like, we're not paying you guys, we got to save our money for attorney's fees?
Yeah, that's in regard to the lawsuit that they're engaged in with Side, which is it's a white label brokerage firm that like handles the back end support for companies like Official, provides the broker, things like that. So Side sued them. I can't remember exactly when, I don't know if you remember, Sheridan, but
it was in October.
Yeah. So this filing recently came out. We have not covered it, so it's not us. But yeah, they were unable to pay their attorneys in that case. So I think the attorneys withdrew.
But if you're into real estate, the real deal is the real deal. They cover this as well as anybody. But Cindy Milosevic here, and I'll go back to Sheridan on this one. Do the brothers here know the numbers have declined? I'm assuming they're hearing from counsel, but also I think maybe Katherine was at this news conference. I was down there with my cell phone, which is how I do things these days. And Howard Shrebnick, who's was representing, I think, is it Oren? I get confused. But anyway, he basically, there was a moment where he called all the accusers liars. I refer to them as victims. He corrected me to accusers, which I guess technically is correct until these guys are convicted, which I believe they will be. But another reporter heard me ask about that, about him referring to, at that time it was 40, saying that they're all liars. Or another reporter heard him say yes, and he said, "What, are you really saying that?" And he responded by saying every single one, meaning every single accuser is lying. But now, Katherine, we're up to 60 from 40. Number one, do you expect that total to grow? And number two, were you surprised by those comments? I don't think he's working for them anymore. But let's start with, from 40 to 60. Where do you see these numbers getting to?
I mean, I think prosecutors have said that they expect, that they've been talking to more women and they expect more women to come forward with allegations. So I don't think it's like a stretch to say that number would likely go up. And there is there will be a new superseding indictment filed. So yeah, I would say that will grow. And I also think with the attorney, with Howard Shrebnick, he's a very aggressive, like, criminal defense lawyer here in South Florida. He's represented, other people. I'm sure you've talked about it on the show. But that's kind of that's the answer that I would expect, from the defense.
I mean, he plays hardball. I thought it was a big mistake. I think he walked it back afterwards, and I've harped on that, but it kind of boggles my mind that he said that. Are there trial dates? Yes, we're going to get to that in a minute. Trial date is set, though, for January of 2026, so basically a year from now, a little bit less than a year from now. But Darby, back to you. So now we go from 40 to 60. We obviously see every day there's another lawsuit filed against Sean Combs, who's now firing back with lawsuits of his own. But does it make it easier if there are victims out there, alleged victims out there, who obviously are, and this is weighing them down. It's heavily weighing on them. Does it make it easier for them to now maybe come forward and either speak to their family members or speak to authorities? We've had Maria, only goes by her first name, on the show, and she was emboldened by hearing other people, and that propelled her to come forward. So what do you think there, Darby? Are we going to see more women because more women feel more comfortable now coming forward?
Yes, I think, Joel, we will see more women come forward because the numbers sort of validate what happened to them and what they were feeling. And especially when you have such powerful and visible people. The Alexander brothers were very visible. Their lifestyle was all over the place in both New York, Miami, wherever. And so I think that women sort of would feel intimidated by them because they're powerful. They had a lot of money. And I think people would also be, the initial MO is, I'm kind of ashamed. But once the numbers start to climb, it's very validating to know I'm not saying it makes it good, but it is validating to know someone else fell victim to these people.
Yeah, so they don't feel alone. LaMesa comes to us from Toronto, friend of the show. Do we know if prosecution or law enforcement is holding tapes, like video, photos, etc., with women who potentially don't even know or remember they were victimized or assaulted? That's a great question. So we do know that when the brothers were arrested here, they raided Tall's apartment in New York, and they got, quote unquote, trophies, videos that these brothers took of themselves, literally engaging in these crimes. So Sheridan, to you, since you're in New York City, that's an interesting question. Do authorities, and I don't know if you know the answer because I don't, but do they have to notify women in these, if they can even identify them, if they themselves have not come forward?
I don't know if they're legally obligated to let these women know, but I don't know why they wouldn't, because if they can identify someone and that person's own story can maybe corroborate some of what they're including in the indictment, then I don't know a reason why they wouldn't contact that person or let them know that they have this video. To the question that was asked, I don't know if they have identified women who themselves don't even know that they were victimized. They've described one of the videos in one of the hearings, but as far as what's actually the content of those and who is in them, the prosecution won't identify. They won't publicly identify victims, and there's some they're asking for the defense to sign a protective order so that the defense can't disclose other victims and witnesses that are included in the indictment.
Wesley John Holmes, an Aussie who comes to us from Tokyo, friend of the show. This family could have used their wealth in so many positive ways in their community, but we get served this. True. I will say this. I personally know people who are very well off and amazing people, very grounded, generous, and they do give to the community. They give to schools. And they do it often. I would say that's, more of kind of the norm than the Alexander brothers. I would say that they're sort of outliers. And speaking of that, Katherine, I was going to ask you I'm going to ask the question I was going to ask. There's this PR image of these brothers that was really developed, that these are good-looking brothers, tall, Oren, and then you've got, of course, Alon, who's always kind of attached to them, that they were the deal makers and all this stuff. How much of that is true, and how much of that is, I don't want to say fabricated, but sort of a marketing illusion? And then I'm going to show everybody a little video.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, there were deals where, high-profile deals where their involvement was kind of questioned, but they were so aggressive in how they got in on some of these deals that I don't know that you can, I think it was partially overblown by like social media and everything that like contributes to that. But they also just were very aggressive in their business, and they kind of, pushed to get in on things that, they maybe weren't involved in before, or other agents may have gotten credit for, had they not been there. So I think that there are definitely, I mean, we've reported on certain deals where they, weren't as involved as they made it seem.
Yeah. They work for like legit news organizations, so they're being more careful than me. Some of this crap is made up, is what I'm trying to get at. So this guy right here, speaking of wealth, he's worth a bunch of billions, and he's uber successful, a hedge fund manager named Ken Griffin, CEO. You see right there, Citadel, and he's high profile yet low profile. Space Coast. He purchased what is said to have been, at least at the time, the biggest real estate transaction in New York City. Space, I'm a little nervous because I see it buffering. Are we able to play this? This is something I found on YouTube about this apartment.
Inside the most expensive apartment in the United States, in a particularly sluggish, high-end real estate market where people are struggling to fill a large number of luxury apartments in New York City, there's a condo apartment at 220 Central Park South valued at a whopping $250 million. In this video, we step inside the most expensive apartment in the United States. Let's get it on.
I want this guy to do my voiceover.
Where multi-million-dollar real estate sales are downright routine, a hedge fund tycoon managed to set a new standard for conspicuous consumption by paying a fortune for an unfinished piece of property in the sky. The billionaire Kenneth C. Griffin spent $238 million for a penthouse at 220 Central Park South that is still under construction, making it the most expensive residential sale in United States history. At 24,000 square feet, this 4-story apartment on the 50th to 53rd floor was part of the 66-floor development by Vornado Realty Trust. With 16 bedrooms, 17 bathrooms, 5 balconies, and a central park-facing terrace, this mega-luxurious apartment is created by combining an 11,000-square-foot duplex on the 50th and 51st floors, listed at $150 million, and 3 relatively smaller apartments on the 52nd and 53rd floors, asking between $26.3 million and $43 million, according to the AG filing as reported by The Real Deal. The building, 220 Central Park South, was designed by A.M. Stern Architects and is home to a few other notable names, including Sting and Trudy Styler, and their $65.75 million unit, and a few billionaires such as Daniel Och, Renata de Carmogo Nascimento, and Eric Schmidt. The unit comes furnished and has more than 70 linear feet of views looking over Central Park, as well as a rare 3 balconies in the living room. 3 sets of full glass double doors allow for abundant natural light, while discreet valances that blend in with the wall color provide a place for curtains to hang subtly if you don't want all the light streaming in. The kitchen comes with marble countertops, 2 sinks, 2 ovens, 2 dishwashers, a Sub-Zero fridge, and meal appliances, including a special wok burner on the stove. Crystal Fleece silverware is included with the deal. 3 of the 4 upper bedrooms are strategically placed at the corners to maximize the views with their floor-to-ceiling windows. The master bedroom has a dressing room in addition to the 2 walk-in closets that could be used as a small office. The master bedroom has an enclosed steam shower, a Jacob Delafont tub with a scalloped marble surround, double sinks, and enclosed Toto Nioris toilet, and radiant heated floors. And so we are clear, all the bathrooms have heated floors. As for the lifestyle, residents have access to an 82-foot saltwater pool, sauna and steam rooms, fitness center, squash, and basketball courts, a golf simulator room, yoga studio, and private spa treatment rooms. There's also a residents-only restaurant by Jean-Georges.
I can't take it anymore. So, Space, let me know how long that goes on for. That's incredible. It's hilarious. For $229 million, you get a meal oven. Wow. Thank you so much. And you get heated floors. Darby does own the penthouse, so I have to be careful with what I say. But Darby, I when you watch that, what are you thinking? I mean, someone said I hate wealth bashing, and that's not what I'm trying to do. I mean, this is a capitalistic country. I'm all for everybody making as much money as they can. It is well deserved. It's just the excess is what I'm interested in from a psychological standpoint. Why do you need all those things? You're never going to use them.
Well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't want to wealth bash. I mean, the excess, is it the views? Is it what I think there's also the other side with people of that much money. If I can afford it, why not? Like, it's certainly beautiful. So I think we have to be careful to make a distinction between wealthy people that have worked hard and can afford these luxuries, and then people who use it as an identification, like the Alexander brothers, who are trying to say, look at us, we are so great. And they use their wealth in a depraved way. Most of these women would probably say they were like enticed by these guys because of this lifestyle. And everybody that's wealthy or privileged isn't thinking along those lines. So I want to make a distinction between a healthy mindset and then someone else.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to reiterate, the 99.9% of people who I know here who are very wealthy are super nice, super grounded, and super generous. Jim Larkin, I would bet 220 Central Park South is and was money laundering. Art sales at obscene prices, same deal. Interesting, who knows? But Katherine, back to you, and I know whoever might know more about this, but we put in a call at STS to Ken Griffin's company, which is Citadel, the hedge fund. And someone said he handles like 50% of all the stock transactions in the country. So he is unbelievably uber wealthy. They got back to us. And, basically shared Business Insider story. And I'm going to, no offense, I hope that doesn't offend you guys, but that's what they gave us. And let me just get rid of this thing. After confirming that Tal did not represent the building, Griffin called Howard Lorber, who's the former CEO of Douglas Elliman, I believe, to ask him to represent him in the deal instead. Griffin felt Tal was too inexperienced, the source close to Griffin said. Lorber agreed to take on the deal. But when news of the sale became public in January 2019, the Wall Street Journal, there you go, The Real Deal, these women, and other outlets reported that the Alexander team had represented Griffin in his purchase. Business Insider published a story on the deal, and Douglas Elliman spokesperson emailed the reporter asking her to include Tal and Oren's names as the buyer's broker. And then it continues. Ken Griffin said that the way Tal and Oren handled the biggest deal of their careers, Ken Griffin's $238 million penthouse, aggravated Griffin so much that the billionaire ultimately had his lawyer send a letter complaining about the brothers' conduct. According to Business Insider, the brothers made unauthorized, self-aggrandizing statements, leaked information about the real estate dealings via, of course, YouTube, of course, Instagram, though they later removed the post, which doesn't matter because everyone's got them, which dates back to 2015. The letter said any client would expect and deserve better for any purchase, regardless of size. Look, Ken Griffin, I don't know him personally. Seems like a good guy. This has nothing really to do with him. But, I mean, Katherine, the bigger point here, I assume that deal was closed. But the bigger point here, I've heard people go so far as to say that they really had nothing to – not only were they, like, did they handle it poorly, but they really didn't have much to do with it. They were kind of like the marketing face of this. And this is how these stories – get developed in the press and the media where you're, the real estate moguls. And so I'm just curious again, like what part, obviously they were successful, but, to what degree, and if you could just speak on this particular deal and Ken Griffin's aggravation, and be careful because he lives in our city now, Miami, but he seems pretty annoyed with them.
Yeah. I mean, when we, one of my former colleagues and I did a profile of Oren and Tal, I believe it was 2019. We had reporting that, from a source, who had said that Ken Griffin, was really not happy with the way that deal got leaked and just the attention surrounding it and the way they, handled themselves. So I think that the Business Insider story that you just quoted, without Howard Lorber, I don't know that they would have had that deal, or been involved in it at all, because Ken Griffin was not happy with them, and I think he vowed to not. I would have to check this, but I think he vowed to not work with them again because of the way that was handled.
And Sheridan, in your reporting, have you found other people who are like similarly dissatisfied from the business perspective, the way these guys handled stuff?
I mean, I will say that within the industry, they did have a reputation as being like kind of difficult to work with. And Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong at any point, but I mean, we've had, over the years, we've had sources tell us that, similar to how we've heard that, other people in the industry may have known about some of their behavior and that there were some like warnings that had floated around, that people felt similarly about the way that they handled their business. And that, there's people for a long time, and especially when I started working at The Real Deal a few years ago, there were mentions that, hey, you should be careful about these guys, like, and people pointed to other reporting that had been out there about deals like the Ken Griffin deal, about how they did business. So they certainly weren't, in terms of like their reputation within the industry, there was certainly a level of like caution that a lot of brokers had about dealing with them.
Darby, I mean, what is the therapists say about that they appear to be, I'll use the word, they won't, because again, they're more refined, but they obviously are shady, cutthroat, conniving, perhaps, doing even, I don't know, but maybe I wouldn't be surprised to find out if they're cheating people, et cetera, et cetera. How does this speak to them as business people?
Well, I think it goes along with what they did to women. And by no way am I implying that this is what people that are in real estate or wealthy do. I'm not saying there's a connection at all. But what I'm saying is someone with such a narcissistic, sociopathic personality type that really preys on other people doesn't care what other people think. And they really are only thinking about what's best for them. They don't care that they treat other people poorly, or even it doesn't even enter their mind. It's all about them, what makes them look good. So it's really important that external piece of, how do I look and what do I need to do to make myself look better is really what drives their motivation. It's not an internal piece that's like, oh, well, that wasn't nice, or I should be polite. They're not thinking that at all.
Yeah. By the way, someone said it doesn't matter that they have money, that they would have been this way if they were poor. Do you agree with that, or you think it's
I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think their parents clearly have something to do with this in raising them to think they're better than others, and that they're really entitled to not treat others of equal value remotely, particularly women.
Yeah. Mo Dean is America's favorite troll, and I can't tell if this is serious or not, but I will respond. If possible, can we have guests with differing views? Anyone know why the brothers might be innocent? Usually 60 women. Where there's smoke, there's fire. I can tell you personally, I probably asked at least 50, if not 100 people about them and who know them, and literally not one person has ever said, oh, yeah, they're good guys. Not one. They've said the exact opposite. That they were predators since high school, and people knew to kind of stay away from them. So they're going to, I believe, get their comeuppance soon enough. Katherine, back to you. I mean, what will be the fallout? I'm more concerned about the actual victims here, and we'll get back to that in a second. But what do you think the fallout is going to be in the real estate community? I mean, I know they were at Douglas Elliman. Are other heads going to roll, or other bodies going to drop, or other people involved? We've heard about male 1 and male 2 in these indictments. So what are you anticipating in terms of kind of the crater effect and ripple effect of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if these allegations are true, this doesn't just happen with brothers. There's other people who are involved. They were agents at Douglas Elliman for a decade before they launched before they launched Official in the summer of 2022. We expect that there will be more people named, throughout the trial.
I'm sorry. Could that come down, because there is going to be a superseding indictment now that the number of victims has grown? Is it possible that we see other defendants named in that superseding indictment?
I don't know. What do you think, Sheridan? I mean, I don't say that's out of the question. But so far we've only really been hearing about more women coming forward with allegations. So I don't know that would happen before the trial, but the expectation is that with so many people looking into this, that more names will come out.
Yeah.
The government did say that they did say when they initially announced the charges that they fully expected that other people would be drawn into this. They basically said, I mean, they didn't say that they had, another indictment ready to go or anything like that, but that they really emphasized that they did not act alone and that they were investigating other people. So I don't know if this indictment would have those people because there's already a trial date. I'm not sure how that works, but the government seemed, pretty convinced that there was going to be more.
By the way, I mean, they're seen in a lot of photos flying on a private jet. Do you know, either of you, if they own that jet, if it belonged to someone else? Any idea?
I believe they owned a seaplane. I think that came out during some of the bond hearings. But they were, throughout the years, they were on other people's private jets. They flew on other like prominent real estate figures' private planes.
And do we know, either of you, if any of those people are potentially being looked at, now in retrospect, knowing what they did? Or, I mean, any idea?
Do you want me to answer that? So, I mean, we don't know anything for sure about who else might be included. They were friends with friends, and part of their whole thing was like that their lifestyle, they wanted to live the lifestyle of their clients. And so, a lot of what we were talking about them like having this kind of display of wealth was in part to like mirror the kind of money and access that the people that they serve also had. And so we know they spent a lot of times in like their social and their professional life was very mixed. That was kind of their whole thing. And they've talked about that, in the past pretty openly. So, in terms of like who in the real estate world or, who in their social life, I'm not, those two worlds for them were very merged. And like I said, we don't know about anyone specifically, but just because of the way that they conducted their business and lived their life, I mean, we're definitely keeping an eye out for any kind of names that, of people that were kind of in their social circle that might be announced.
Well, let us know when you hear if that does in fact come out. Modine again, and I'll have Katherine address this one. So I think it was Oren who was administered a lie detector test, but it was about one person and really specific questions. Am I right, Katherine?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and that was his attorney. Yeah, his attorney had the lie detector test done.
Yeah. So speaking of his attorney, I think I have a comment from him, and I have a question for you guys, because here's the comment, I believe. Let me see if I can get it up there. Richard Clue, Oren's defense attorney. The government continues to make hyperbolic statements in court regarding the number of accusers and the government's misguided efforts to solicit witnesses to prop up a baseless and publicity-driven case have yielded no credible evidence of any crime except for I don't know how many terabytes of video and other things they got at Tal's, and 60 now women coming forward. Except for that, they've yielded no credible evidence of any crime. Oren looks forward to further establishing his innocence. Katherine, he's based down here, so I'm going to come to you. I mean, I asked this guy some questions. I got to tell you, I mean, he was going through an eye issue at the time, but he's a little bit older, and I don't want to beat up on older people, but he just did not seem, and I think he has a reputation as being a fantastic defense attorney. He did not come across that way to me in any way, shape, or form. Do we know? I was I don't know, curious and wondering, why did Oren pick this guy when there's so many others? Do we know, number one, if he's still with them? And, what, I guess, your experience with Richard Clue, if any, what it's been like? Is he just basically shut the door in your face when you have asked him questions?
I don't know. I believe he is still representing him. I know that they have been interviewing, trial attorneys to join the case. I quoted him from the hearings in Miami. I haven't had any like one-on-one experiences that were like, anything out of the ordinary with him. I think I don't know. I mean, I know Sheridan, he did speak at the last hearing in New York, and he talked about the lie detector test then, but they don't admit those in court. Yeah.
Yeah. Now to the victims for a few minutes, and then in a little bit we'll get some final thoughts. But a couple of things I want to get to. Darby, we had a victim on, and I'm sure that both Katherine and Sheridan have talked to many more than I have, which I'll ask them about. But this victim that we had on, who just goes by her first name, Maria, she said that Oren attacks her in the Versace Watchtower, which is here in Miami Beach. And she describes him as being possessed. What do you think's going on psychologically? Because here's a guy who appeared, on CNBC, somewhat frequently, and other big networks. And I got to say, he didn't come across overly intelligent on there either, which mystified me a little bit. But how do you have a person who is seemingly a good-looking, quote-unquote, normal guy, and then, at a party, corners a woman in a Versace watchtower and literally just flips a switch? What's going on here?
Well, I think that's part of the what they're alleged to have done is about power and control. And that flipping the switch is, I will control you and I will get what I want. And so it is actually common to hear that description of going from the gentleman that she described earlier in the evening and the reason she was there to this violent, possessed person that just switched on her and forced himself on her. So that is what we would expect as a profile of people able to do this sort of crime.
Yeah, and this is probably not far off.
Yeah,
but they were known to have a lot of drugs at these parties, including the so-called date what drug, GHB. Is it GHB or GB? I always get confused, but he was probably on drugs. Coffee Cake says. Sheridan, I mean, you've talked to victims. What's your experience? You're obviously a woman, and you're speaking to female victims. What's the experience been like for you interviewing them? It's got to be tough.
I think, Catherine can also speak to this. I mean, it is. I mean, it was tough when we first read the lawsuits, when we found them back in June. It's really, I think during the kind of Me Too movement that happened around 2016, you get used to a lot of stories about sexual harassment and that kind of thing, which is, not to diminish that at all, and those horrific experiences. But I think reading about this stuff and talking to people about these like alleged attacks, it's difficult. I mean, it's kind of the thing you're like, as a woman, the most afraid of. You don't hear about this kind of like violent attack that often. And so it is, I mean, it's difficult, and it's really difficult for them to share their stories. I mean, for some of the women who have come forward, I mean, they're describing incidents that, occurred so long ago, and they've lived a long time with this. And, some of them have told people through the years, some of them haven't. And so it's, it's really tough. And this is a really public thing now. And so even when it first came out, women within the industry who knew about the industry, I mean, how intimidating for them. And now that it's such a big story, I think, while the numbers do help with some people coming forward and feeling more comfortable, I do think it's really scary that this, and I think it's intimidating now that there's like an investigation, and you're going to have to remember like precise details of something that happened, may have happened to you decades ago. It's really difficult. And I think the women that have come forward have, it has had to overcome a lot of kind of hurdles in order to be able to do that. And they put a lot on the line to put their names out there.
Really well said. Katherine, to you, what's it been like for you down here talking to women?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to hear these stories. I think at the end of the day, like I just have to kind of think about how hard it is for these women to share them. And there's women who we've talked to who have not come forward, so it's, and I tell people, like, even if you don't, you are very brave for talking about it.
Let me just interrupt you there, because that's really interesting. So you have actually spoken to women who've talked to you, but they haven't come forward to law enforcement or authorities. Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow. And are these specific women telling you why they are not going to law enforcement? Is it that they're embarrassed? Is it that they're afraid? Is it that they feel there's a statute of limitations? What kind of reasons do they give you?
And I think it depends on the situation, but for a lot of people, they don't want anything. They don't, and it's something that will be out there forever. So, depending on how you come forward, like if you come forward publicly or not, the internet doesn't, forget. So I think that's kind of, they don't want to be defined by something that may have happened to them. And the way it is, is it's on the alleged victim to come forward. It's not, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, there's an imbalance, I think, there.
Yeah, it's interesting. My mom is a child Holocaust survivor, and I wrote the book about her, obviously the same title as a podcast, but people make fun of me because I plugged the book. But the reason I wrote the book is I didn't really know much about her story, because my mom is one of these people that never wants to be identified by something negative. She's incredibly positive. She doesn't want it, like she doesn't want to be known as the Holocaust survivor, which unfortunately that's what I've helped create. But that's something that she never really focused on. I mean, Darby, to you're the expert at this. I mean, these women who do come forward and are willing to, they're going to testify. What is that experience going to be like for them in a high profile case like this? I mean, there are no cameras in federal court, but you will hear about their testimony. You're probably not going to see sketches, but you're going to know, and you're going to get information. And it's going to be a packed courtroom with Sheridan and Katherine probably both there. And I think I'm going to head up there as well. What's that experience going to be like for these victims?
It's very hard for the victims, and they will be questioned. They will be, cross-examined. And it's very hard because they try and throw doubt, not only doubt in their mind, but they act as if they were responsible. Like, why were you there? Why did you do that? Were you taking drugs? So they will try and cast as much doubt and blame on these victims as possible. And that's really hard. But as we saw with Maria, when she came forward, she was pretty unflappable. I mean, she just told her story, and she, it would be hard to throw any doubt in that story. It will be very difficult to come forward.
Sheridan, I mean, I know you're not a lawyer, but have you gotten any kind of feedback on how tough a case this is going to be to try for? I mean, the SDNY are probably the best at it, and they've got like a 98% conviction rate. So it's not something that's overly concerning, I don't think, but it can sometimes come down to, like he said, she said. Have you talked to people about that?
Yeah, I've talked to people about it a bit. I mean, of course, like you said, the feds have a really high conviction rate, so they have the luxury of being able to choose the cases they want to bring, and so they don't usually do so if they don't think they have like a pretty good chance of winning. But of course, there's always that rate's not 100%. And the defense attorneys for the brothers have kind of projected a lot of confidence about how triable this case is. In some of the hearings, they've made many comments about, that we have a really strong case, and we really think that this is something we're going to take it all the way. And so, they certainly believe that they have enough up their sleeve in terms of, their own evidence and their own stories. And so there's, they certainly think that there's a lot to discuss. I mean, the thing that everyone, I think, will have to remember about the trial is that it's about, I mean, until the new charges, come forward, the superseding indictment comes out, it is about trafficking. Can I say that on here?
Yeah.
And the conspiracy to do that. And so, what they're really going to argue in the case is about that, which is not necessarily the same thing as just like drugging and an essay, and like that's all wrapped up in it, according to the prosecutors. But so it'll really come down to like those specific charges, and that's what's going to get the evidence about can you prove that kind of scheme, is what's going to get discussed. And so I don't know what evidence the prosecution has aside from what they've already said they have. So we'll see what happens, but it'll and then the superseding indictment may have other charges. I'm not sure, but that's going to be the heart of the legal case, which is they'll be arguing. There will be a lot of like technicalities, I guess, involved with that too, and not just like victim accounts, but also does what the government is saying they did meet the standards to enforce this law.
Again, very well said. We're going to find out. I mean, speaking of the victims again, Katherine, 60 have come forward. That doesn't mean 60 are going to testify, and they might take like the 5 or 10 strongest cases. I don't know, but do you have an idea of how many alleged victims we could see when this goes to trial in January?
I don't know how many. I think it would depend on how many like specific counts and instances they end up citing in their final indictment. But I don't know. I think they will focus on their strongest cases, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So I was just reading this somewhere that apparently, do we know, because at one point they fired their Miami counsel. Do we know if all 3 brothers have counsel? Because I've seen or read that Arthur Idala, who's a very well-known criminal defense attorney in New York City, he's a tough mob attorney, been in the business a long time. He's on TV all the time, but apparently the family is speaking with him or consulting with him. But do we know if they are set with their counsel up in New York City?
So they actually haven't fired their Miami attorneys. They were both Richard and Howard Shrevenick were at the last hearing. They're looking for new counsel to add to the team. I don't know if they're actually ever going to get, take Richard and Howard off the team. They may, if they find trial attorneys in New York that, and Howard and Richard don't want to continue with the case because, it's the trial attorney's areas of expertise. At the last hearing last week, they had initially pushed it back so that they could find New York counsel. And they hadn't yet at that point. At least they hadn't finalized anything yet because it was Richard Clue and Howard Shrevenick as, who are representing Oren and Alon. And Tall, I believe his counsel is New York based. So I think as far as I know, they haven't expressed that he's going to be adding anyone else to the team or replacing them. The other 2 are looking, but they hadn't, at least as early as I think it was Friday was the last hearing, that they hadn't added anyone new. And the judge asked about it because she wanted to know, that's why they pushed it back. And so she was wondering, like, why am I seeing these attorneys? Aren't there supposed to be new attorneys? And they said they were looking but hadn't picked anyone yet.
Yeah. On this topic of me talking to like probably between 50 and 100 people and no one having a good thing to say about them, Katherine, I'm wondering if you had the same experience or if someone was like, oh, they're great, they're fantastic, they're fun, outgoing guys. I mean, did you come across that with people?
I mean, I think like in the they had support in the courtroom. There's people comment on our social media posts. Some people, I mean, I think they're in the minority online, but in support of them. I'm
sorry, on whose social media?
On the Real Deals post.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's become, I mean, I think if you go back to when we first published, there have been a lot of, it's kind of been like a meeting place, I guess, for people to comment. But I think even what's kind of interesting is like when we were reporting on these allegations, I had a number of people, reach out to me and say like, I don't know about this, but they were like horrible in business, or they screwed me with this, or, and stuff like that. I think, most of the time you don't hear people saying like the opposite, but yeah, my experience has been that's kind of been in the minority.
So for those who do not know, now you know Darby Fox. She is on all the TV shows and news programs. She is a licensed therapist, and she deals and has dealt with victims of sexual predators. If these allegations, Darby, are proven true, and these guys are convicted a year from now, which personally I think is what is going to happen, what does justice look like for these victims?
Well, that's hard to say. I think that they've lived with it for so long and such a variety, but I think just knowing that they were validated and heard, that there was some truth to this, will be a huge relief. It goes a long ways towards healing. It certainly doesn't erase what happened to them, but it is an important piece of healing for the victims.
Yeah. I do know that the parents have been there. in all the proceedings. I don't want to get myself sued, so I won't ask the next question, but just let me put it this way. The apples apparently don't fall far from the tree here, is what I've heard. So if you don't know, now you know that the real deal is, in fact, the real deal. They cover real estate like no one else. And you heard that Katherine's been with them for about a decade. Sheridan, less than that. But Sheridan is based in New York City, where this is all going to go down. Do we know when the next court date is, Sheridan? And I guess, is there something that you're kind of keeping an eye out for right now that you can give us a little teaser about?
Well, they have a number of like more procedural things coming up. A lot of the dates are over the summer and through the fall. I think the biggest thing we're looking out for is the new indictment, which the government estimated at least as early as spring. So maybe I think at one point she mentioned April. So we're kind of keeping an eye out for that, because I think they're kind of holding on some things until that comes out, because the judge is expecting that. So that's probably the next big kind of thing to keep an eye out for.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm from my experience, I will tell you that I'm almost certain that the SDNY does have evidence that's very incriminating that we don't know about yet, but we will find out about at the appropriate time. Katherine Kallergis?
Yep.
Am I close? There you go. Katherine. Shouldn't be that hard. Katherine Kallergis. I don't know what it is. I think it might be the double L's. I don't know. But anyway, Katherine is a longtime investigative reporter at The Real Deal. And your final thoughts here, Katherine. I mean, are you planning, number one, to go to the trial up in New York City? I think I'm going to do that. And, from a Miami perspective, what are you interested in kind of pursuing from a reporter standpoint?
I think, I hope to cover the trial with Sheridan. I think that we are, one thing I want to say is we are still continuing to report on, the people who may have been involved in this and how they, really their career rose, over the past, 12 or so years, 12, 13 years. And we're still reporting. There's still a lot more that hasn't been told. So, I urge like anybody who may have any information to reach out to us. But yeah, I think there's still a lot to do. And obviously Miami, they grew up here. They were all, I believe, technically based here. So it's definitely a big part of the story.
Yeah, we did this for the Adelson case. We did like a Adelson tour, and I've been meaning to do it. I just haven't had the time, but I'm going to do a tour of the Alexander brothers, kind of show people who are not from this area where they grew up, where they went to school, that sort of thing. And I'm going to post it on YouTube. But Katherine brings up a really important point, which is if there are people out there, and I'm sure that there are, and if you happen to be watching this, this platform is open to anybody who wants to talk about anything. You don't have to be a victim if you knew them, and it doesn't have to be public. You can email me confidentially, survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com. And if you want to talk, to Sheridan or Katherine and not me, contact me and I will put you in touch with them. I'm not one of these cutthroat crazy guys. I'm too old now, too tired for that, but I will put you in touch with them. And the important thing is that you just get your word heard. So if you are out there and you're kind of on the fence and you want to speak, even if you want to talk to Darby, who's a therapist, reach out, survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com. I do consider STS Nation like family. There's a lot of victims actually who are in here. And, I'm wishing the best for them, but also for the victims of this case, particularly the ones that are too scared to come forward. Hopefully that will change over time. Ethel, don't take this the wrong way, but my beloved boxer, her name is Ethel, and her brother's name is Fred, and I love her dearly. There used to be a Mabel in our chat. I don't know where she is, Mabel Quintanilla. One of the true loves of my life was my 17-year-old puggle, Mabel Rose, but I digress, and she is no longer with us. But every time Mabel Quintanilla would come on, I would tell her how much I miss Mabel, but I do love my wife and my children as well, and even my mom. So there you go. Huge thanks. The real deal, or like, who is this guy's crazy? Darby already knows I'm crazy. Hopefully we'll get Sheridan and Katherine back on. Darby will definitely come back on, I think. Thank you all for being here. Tomorrow, again, we're doing a story. Is there a serial killer in New Orleans? A reporter died there covering the Super Bowl, and police think that it might be the case. And then it's time to put together next week's shows. And I think I'm going to treat myself to taking off President's Day, because it's been incredibly hectic. With that said, love you all. Love you, America. Love you, the Republic of Ireland. I keep getting yelled at for not shouting out Australia, Melbourne, Australia, Connecticut. We got New York City in the house, next door to my home state of New Jersey, and of course, Miami. And let's get justice for these victims. And guests, stick around 1 second.